Hello, BookTube. It's Roz from Scully Dangling About the Books. And
I'm
Brian.
Elisabeth from Bouquets
Oh,
and Books. Sorry.
okay. Brian from Bookish.
brilliant. And jointly, we've been the three hosts of People April, which was Elisabeth's inspiration to encourage people to read books about people, individuals and groups, uh, in every April. And each time we have a group read, and this time our group read was Raising Hare by Chloe Dalton. And so the doesn't that, what a lovely cover that is. Doesn't it look gorgeous, that hair? I love that. Um, and so we thought we'd have a little conversation about what we thought of the book, what other people in the on BookTube and in the Discord conversation have said about the book, and maybe a little bit about that sort of genre of memoir. So that's our plan.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
and
a
just
question for you, Roz.
go for
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, you suggested the book because we suggest a list of 4 or 5 books so that people can vote for. So I suggest one or two, Brian suggests one or two, and Roz suggests one or two. And then Raising Hare was one of your choices. So I was
It
wondering what made you choose the book.
What made me choose it? Well, two things I'd say. One is that I rather like the sort of the sub the memoir subgenre that's kind of like nature, landscape, those kinds of memoirs, and so it naturally appealed to me. And the other reason is because it was on the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction long list and indeed short list. So that kind of pushed it up my
Yeah.
interest, and I thought that might appeal to other readers.
Has the winner been announced?
No, no, no,
Not yet.
not yet.
Okay.
Soon,
Yeah,
though, I think.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
soon.
and I'm definitely crossing my fingers for this one. So, uh, first question has to be: did we enjoy it, Brian? What about you?
I enjoyed it immensely. A couple of things I thought about it. One, I had an experience when I was a kid where we found an injured rabbit
Mhm.
and had to decide what to do with it. So immediately, the book centers on the author finding a leveret or a baby hare and having decided to do it. So that drew me in right away. Kind of an Anglophile, so anything set in the English countryside is going to appeal to me. And the lady's home that she converted a barn into a house, the whole thing appealed to me. And I just thought the writing was extraordinary. I thought for someone who this is their first book, the clarity of her prose and the ability to create tension and emotion over what essentially is a lady deciding to raise a rabbit or a hare. Sorry, I thought all that was really well done, and they're cool pictures in it too. So I
Yes.
love the illustrations as well.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Elisabeth? Was it a thumbs up for you? Or?
Oh, absolutely a thumbs up from me. I don't have Brian's experience with any little animals that I found in the wild, uh, just a bunch of squirrels. But I have the same attraction for English countryside. I think there are so many great books set in the English countryside. So there's something a bit magical to it. Perhaps it's just viewed from North America. Perhaps from England, you don't see that, Roz. um,
Oh no, no.
but
The countryside setting, yeah,
yeah,
very much appealed to me too. It
yeah.
was interesting. The We had a discussion on Discord about the book, and one of the people in that commented at one point that one thing they were disappointed by was that she doesn't specify where this house is, what part of the country, or she'd have liked to know more and then be able to look at that landscape or that area. What did you think? Do you think she should have done?
Perhaps because from what I heard, the countryside in England varies a lot from one county to another. So the
Okay.
landscape is not necessarily the same from one place to another. And at first, when she talked about the house and where it was situated, I imagined rollicking hills and beautiful greenery like that. And then at some point, she mentions that it's all flat. So I had the wrong image in my mind. So yes, I think a few names perhaps saying in this county or a bit more north or south, or no, I think she mentioned a distance from London. So I think that gives us a bit of
Yeah. But
an
that's quite
indication.
a wide range. But I mean,
Yeah.
I did think presumably she didn't want people coming looking for the house or looking for the hair. Yeah, it's partly protective, isn't it, to not say, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was wise, even though, I guess in thinking about it, I might have I just imagined it wherever I wanted it to be. So I probably
Yeah.
ignored the geographic descriptions and imagined it being someplace like, I don't know, Devon or someplace like that
Yeah.
is what struck me. So,
Yeah, I assumed west, but you know, for no apparent reason. Perhaps only because that's a place where people, often have second homes. So
Oh,
I
and
don't,
farming was, I mean, there's a lot of
oh,
farming discussion. So yeah,
yeah,
I assumed it was like further away from London than like, suburban areas around London.
yeah,
So.
yeah.
yeah.
So we were broadly positive, all three of us, about the book. Thinking about the discussion on Discord, I think, virtually everyone was also very positive about the book. I think there were a couple of criticisms, which I found interesting, apart from, yeah, Karen saying, why didn't you tell us where it was? Um, a really, an interesting one that came from Amelia was about perhaps a slight lack of self-awareness, or a bit of hypocrisy about sort of that thing of focusing in on rescuing one animal and not thinking about your overall impact as a person on nature or animals, and Amelia say was talking about being vegan and how that sort of matters to her in relation to animals, but
Mhm.
but I think she was making a broader point that this kind of book, it can be sort of all about the individual and this special relationship with an animal, as opposed to really getting the the bigger picture. I don't know. Do you think that's fair?
That didn't bother me at all. I mean, I appreciated Amelia's comment, and I take it for what it's worth. But and maybe it's just my own philosophy. We can only all do what we can do. We can't solve every problem ourselves. We can't address every problem involving the
Yeah,
way humanity impacts animals in a book
yeah,
about a hare.
yeah,
If that's what, then it becomes a different book,
yeah,
and it becomes a book I'm not sure that our author would have been the person to write.
yeah,
So I kind of am, I'll take this and you guys worry about all the rest of it kind of thing. And we're all doing our part to do that one thing. And I think we're probably doing okay. And I thought she did bring in bigger issues with,
mm,
industrial farming and the impact it has and
mm,
other species of animals that are impacted. And there's that scene where, she goes out essentially looking for the leveret and the field has been harvested and they're, you know, well, they're casualties everywhere kind of a thing. And I think she
mm,
kind of does address it. But I think Amelia's point was a good one.
Mhm.
I think for me, I'm pretty aware of where my food comes from and how that
yeah,
works and the decisions I make and how they impact things. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
but
I agree. My question was, why did she pick it up at the beginning? Why did she think picking it up would save it for a night or two? Because at first that is what she thought. She thought she would just take care of it for a night and then bring it back to the mother. And to
Mhm.
me, that was the place where I thought, well, you really don't know anything about animals.
Yeah, I did think she was quite naive about what was going to happen. And, to a certain extent, I think if you're going to criticize her, the place to criticize her is in that initial decision.
yeah,
That what she was taking on is a lot more than she thought.
mhm,
And I think she took it on because she just couldn't stand the idea of leaving it there, which, may have actually been the right thing to do.
yeah,
But
Mhm.
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think she's quite honest about her naivety, and she doesn't set herself up as any sort of expert. One of the things I liked, though, was she then really did set to try and, once she embraced the fact that she now was responsible for this baby animal, that she was trying to find out about hares and about raising hares, and how, and actually found there was surprisingly little information, didn't she? So
Yeah.
she
I
actually,
was surprised by that, by how little we knew or what. or also what we think we know. I say we collectively, like humankind, not me personally. What we think we know about hares, a large part of it doesn't appear to be true given her experience of it. She had a very different experience from what she found out in books. So, yeah.
I think,
And a Victorian poet, Cooper, was more reliable than in fact, no, just pre-Victorian than a lot of other information she had.
well, you know, as unfortunate as it is, a lot of times hunters know a whole lot about animals. Because you know that's kind of what they're interested in a different way than I probably am. But yeah, I thought, you know, that was kind of for me interesting. And then my other reaction to the book was that this lady's kind of crazy because I mean, she literally like turns her life to a certain extent upside down to keep hosting these litters of hares in her home over and over again and just let them have the run of the house. I think at some point would have been like, no, I'm sorry, Mama, you got to keep the little leverets outside, you know. But I thought that was weird.
Yes, and leaving the door open all the time so that they can come and go.
Yeah, she clearly doesn't live where there are mosquitoes.
Yeah,
so
mosquitoes or cold, like Canada.
Right.
You can't do that in winter.
She must not live in Scotland because there'd be midges in the summertime.
Yes, so it's got to be in the south of England, hasn't it?
Yeah.
To be able to do that. I think, but I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it might have been Tazy that talked about this, but in the Discord about that sort of the disconnect between city life and country life, and she has connections with the country and was able to have this home there, but she's very much a city woman, and you know that almost it's the peculiar circumstances of COVID and the lockdown that put her in this position and made her open to this possibility, I suppose. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was another comment we saw on Discord, how the book also shows the weirdness of the years of COVID, how different they were from any other year that we had.
Yeah, and that people embarked on doing things they wouldn't normally do, and that seemed to be sort of what happened to her. But then, having done that, that changed her as a person, I suppose. Yeah.
Somebody, I think in the comments on Discord brought up that, you know, she was very privileged to be able to, you know, live this life. And I wondered, that's not something that I think she doesn't address that directly. She doesn't seem to necessarily acknowledge her privilege. She's not hiding it. I mean, she clearly is in a financial position to have converted this barn in the country and to spend a lot of time there. But I kind of thought, for me, that was one of those things that, you know, I was thinking is, you know, this is kind of an extraordinary situation in which you could be in financially and et cetera, to even allow this to happen. And how many people walking past a little leveret on the ground would have to take into consideration all the other things. And like you were saying, at a different time other than COVID, maybe she thinks, well, I have to go back to London tomorrow. And so, you know.
Yeah. I think, Tilly was pointing out the sort of, she didn't really think about the fact that here she is running a second home and you know, probably unlike where you live in the UK, like there's a real issue of lack of housing in rural areas for the people who grow up there. You know, second homes are a big political, social sort of issue here, because we have less space.
Yes, the country's full.
Well, in our case here in the United States, so many investment companies are buying homes to rent that a lot of young potential homeowners can't afford to buy a home because those investment companies drive up the prices of homes and they price them out of the reach
and in
of young
thirsty
people.
place, it's Airbnbs that are taking over the places.
I say that as somebody who, you know, is potentially about to benefit from something like that, hopefully. But
you know, she didn't really seem to sort of reflect on that greatly.
Right.
One of the things that a number of people on the Discord referred to as one of the things that they loved about the book was the actual writing. You know, her writing style, and people used words like precise and elegant and detailed. And was that how you kind of felt about it?
Yes. I don't know if I would have the words to describe the writing, just a question of language, because English is my second language. But I appreciated about the writing was that she managed to express a very moving story, but it never fell into sentimentality. She didn't overdo it. Like, one of my favorite scenes was one of the first time that she saw the hare with her little leverets, with her little bunnies. And it was just so moving and so touching. And when I reread that paragraph, it was just a series of facts, just what she observed. There was nothing else. And the scene in itself was so touching.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that in the book, I think she uses the phrase gin clear like gin. And I thought that describes the writing to me, that's a really good description of how the writing felt, just like that kind of perfect kind of crystal almost structure. But yeah, I thought the writing was really impressive.
One of the people in the Discord group, Caroline, summed it up really well for me. She said, I very much like the author's precision with language, the grace and fluidity of her storytelling. And I thought her decision to focus on her interaction with the hare and her leverets, leaving out a lot of personal information, was correct. And it's just what you were saying, Elisabeth. It's actually quite factual, and yet it had emotional weight for me as a story. Yeah, I was very engaged, and quite a few people. We set a schedule for reading this over 4 weeks, and an awful lot of people read it a lot faster. I mean, like early on, there were people like Tom and Grogan, and a number of people said, "Oh, I just had to read it. I couldn't, it had a page-turny quality that was surprising for something so factual, isn't it?"
Yeah, I read the entire second part in one evening. It was 150 pages, and I read it, well, maybe one day. It was a Saturday, so I just read it. It was just so good, couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
She really gets you invested in what's going to happen, and even introduces like a little bit of tension without ever like overplaying it, without ever being too dramatic. There's this tension where I wanted to know what's going to happen. What's going to happen with that leveret that's behind the curtain whose legs don't seem to work. I was like, I got to figure out what's happened to this little hare. So I thought that was really well done. And there was I think we talked about this in the Discord. There's only one point where I thought she's right at the edge of preaching to us about things when I think she's made the point without the preaching, but she pulled back, and it was fine.
She and I really appreciated that the way she is working so hard not to domesticate the hare in how she handles it, and then not to anthropomorphize it at all in how she writes about it. Both those things were things that could have turned me off the book, and she swerved both of them, didn't she?
Yeah. She never names any of them, and she just, other than letting them have free run of her house, which and feeding them, which at some point I thought, if you're feeding them these oats and letting them crawl, you are kind of still treating them like a pet just a little. You know what I'm saying? I thought that was a little maybe more treating them like a pet than otherwise. But I thought what she describes was what I would consider to be a good job in that circumstance.
Yeah, and like you say, Brian, if you feed them, they will come back and back and come back. And then if she starts to have babies in the house, it says in the book that they can have babies 3 times a year.
Yeah.
That could be a lot in a house. How does it end?
Right, particularly when they can be carrying a litter and then get pregnant again. And actually have 2 litters going at the same time. I was like, oh my goodness, you're going to be overrun with hares in your house, and that was worrisome. And how much leveret poop can mom eat to keep your house clean? Because that was kind of I thought one of the things I thought was interesting was that I know, but mom's going to be really full at some point if she keeps having babies. I thought, but
she does make some quite important points towards the end of the book, doesn't she? And I I felt she was sort of speaking to her realization about these things. The reason, you were saying, Brian, that she just avoids being preachy. And I kind of felt that was because in a way she wasn't, it was like she was admitting that she hadn't really thought about this stuff before. It was almost like she was expressing what she's realized, and she wasn't too much sort of telling us, and all the rest of you have got to be good now. Now I've discovered this. So
I think that's a good point. I think that's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Because I have read similar books that, where it does tip over in that way. Yeah. One of the things that we asked the Discord group at the end was there were other similar books that they'd recommend, like a sort of like, if you enjoy Raising Hare, you might enjoy this, or vice versa. If you enjoy this, you might enjoy Raising Hare. And one that came up several times was H is for Hawk, which was a very popular book a few years ago. I read it. Did either of you read that one?
I have not read it.
No. It's different in that it is a captive animal. It's about the author's responding to bereavement, losing her father, by training a falcon,
Right.
like falconry. I actually thought Raising Hare was a better book than that, although it was enormously popular, partly because that writer seemed a bit more sort of self-obsessed, I suppose. Marley and Me was another, which I think is about a stray dog. I haven't read that one.
I can't read sad dog books. A sad dog book. That's just I can't read those. Sorry.
I think it's a happy dog book.
I don't think it is, but all
Or
right.
is it? I don't know. I haven't read it.
I think most dog books end badly.
Yeah. There was but some other lovely recommendations, and I will put them all in the show notes for this. But were there any others that you'd recommend sort of along these lines, or in the sort of nature memoir line?
I don't necessarily have nature memoirs, I guess, but I did think there were two books I read that they're not about animals, but just about nature in general that recently that I liked. I really liked Robert Macfarlane's Underland, which I thought was just really well done, even though if you're claustrophobic, this is not your book, because he describes people going in places where that would be my nightmare. But I did think it was a really good book, and kind of talking about things that we don't see and the impact we have on those places. And then the other one I had was Islands of Abandonment, Nature Rebounding in a Post-Human Landscape, which kind of like is the most, I don't want to say hopeful about the environment and about climate change, because it seems ridiculous and naive to be hopeful, but it does talk about how nature does recover from the damage that human beings do. And this kind of reemphasized to me that, climate change isn't a problem for the planet. It's a problem for us. Because nature will probably, or lots of nature will adapt, particularly animal or plant life, but even animal life will adapt. And she goes to lots of places. I think there's a World War I chemical weapons dump she goes to, and she goes to abandoned communities in Cyprus that are along the what do you call that, the demilitarized zone there, and talks about how nature's made a comeback in homes and places. Anyway, I found that to be kind of hopeful, and I guess it's macabre to say that I'm hopeful that it made me hopeful the planet will go on even if we don't make it, but that's true.
What about you, Elisabeth?
Well, a bit like Brian, I don't have a specific book about involving an animal. But the last chapter about the impact of harvesting on the poor little leverets, it made me think of another book. It made me think of Pastoral Song by James Rebanks. He's a farmer in Britain, and he talked about in this book the impact of industrial farming on the land and how sustainable it is, and the impact that, for example, pesticides have, or the destruction of hedges to make larger fields and things like that, how much it changes the ecosystem and how in the long term it's damaging for nature, so for all sort of animals and insects and birds, and also perhaps in the long term for humans. Because
Yeah.
if it's not sustainable, it's not good for us.
Yeah. If there's one thing that's come out of the whole Robert F. Kennedy psychopathy here in the United States in terms of health and human services, is that some of his supporters are kind of anti-industrial farming, talking about small local farming, sourcing locally, and more sustainable farming. And that's something I think is a great idea for all kinds of reasons. But yes, for environmental reasons, but also then just for health reasons also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Roz?
Well, and we probably should wrap up, but I'm going to mention two. One is Waterlog by Roger Deakin, and that's about he goes and swims wild swimming in different places around the country, and it's sort of talking about the nature and the environment, and obviously the condition of rivers and lakes and so on in this country, you know, can be quite poor, but also the impact that has on him as a person. So that kind of, in the way that Raising Hare, she's talking about the impact on her. And Robert Macfarlane is always a good recommendation. So you know, I might well have mentioned one of his too, but I'm glad you did, Brian. So I think we'd all say, do read this book. You will enjoy it, I think.
Yes,
absolutely.
And thank you everyone who sort of took part in the conversation on Discord. It was really rich and really brought a lot more to my reading the book, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes. Shall we say bye?
All right.
Bye.
Bye.